Gemini, you are mysterious by nature, but these 7 secrets will reveal you. Gemini, you've heard before, you're hard to read. You're so unpredictable. I never really know what's going on in your head. And maybe, for a long time, you've worn that like armor, a quiet pride in being untamed, a private joy in knowing there are parts of you no one can quite pin down. But what if this mystery that surrounds you isn't about being confusing? What if it's about being complex, multidimensional, layered, and beautifully human in ways the world isn't always prepared to understand? You, Gemini, are one of the most misunderstood signs in the zodiac. Not because you're scattered or shallow as some claim, but because you are vast. And today, we're going to reveal the 7 deepest truths behind your mysterious nature. The hidden reasons you feel both seen and unseen, loved and misread, admired and misjudged. These aren't generic traits or surface-level descriptions. These are the soul-level secrets that explain why you're the way you are, why your energy shifts, why you crave stimulation but also silence, why you speak so much yet hide so well. And once they're revealed, you'll begin to understand yourself in a new way, not through others' lenses, but through your own essence. If any part of you feels curious, called, or even slightly nervous right now, that's your intuition speaking. Let's walk through this together. And if you feel seen, supported, or inspired, feel free to like, share, or subscribe. Not out of obligation, but because this space is here for you. Gate 1. You don't just have duality. Gemini, you live in a constant dialogue between selves. Gemini, people often say you're two-faced, but what they don't understand is that you're not hiding anything. You're holding everything. Within you are 2 fully formed energies, 2 perspectives, 2 voices, 2 emotional climates, each with their own dreams, fears, logic, and longings. You don't switch between personalities to deceive. You flow between them to survive. At your core, there's a constant conversation happening. One voice whispers for peace, lightness, laughter, and freedom. The other craves depth, truth, and intensity, even if it means disruption. And while others may assume you're indecisive, what they don't see is the real storm, the tension of trying to honor both. Your desire to be kind and your urge to speak raw truth often collide. Not because you're insincere, but because you want to be both honest and gentle, real and respected. And sometimes, the only way to maintain that balance is to retreat. This inner dialogue shapes everything, from your friendships to your ambitions. You want connection, but you also want space. You want freedom, but you yearn for deep loyalty. You want to be understood, yet you resist being defined. This isn't contradiction, it's complexity. And for much of your life, you've been punished for it. Told to just choose, to settle down, to make up your mind. But how can you, when your mind is built to see both sides of every coin, to feel the yes and the no simultaneously? This constant inner dialogue doesn't mean you're confused. It means you're multilingual in truth. You can speak optimism and melancholy in the same breath. You can shift from playful banter to existential depth in seconds. And while this fluidity sometimes feels like a burden, it's actually your genius. You were never meant to choose one self over the other. You were meant to hold the dialogue, to become fluent in polarity, and to teach others that the soul is not a single note, it's a symphony. But this gift can become exhausting when the world demands consistency. When you're forced to present a version of yourself that is palatable, predictable, and stable. Because the truth is, stability isn't always your home. Motion is. Not erratic movement, but conscious, curious movement. Gemini is not a tornado. It is a breeze that carries wisdom between rooms, between people, between realms. You've likely felt torn between parts of yourself. Perhaps the part that wants to explore everything and the part that longs to commit to one thing fully. Maybe you wonder why decisions take so long, or why, even after making one, you still feel pulled in another direction. That's because both selves still live within you, and both deserve a seat at the table. Let's take an example. One Gemini man I knew, Marcus, spent years struggling to decide whether to move across the world for a creative opportunity or stay in his home city to deepen roots. Everyone saw him as indecisive, but privately, he was experiencing 2 authentic callings, one toward reinvention, one toward stability. He wasn't fickle, he was faithful to both his truths. Eventually, he found a third path, traveling in seasonal bursts while building his home life slowly in between. It wasn't a compromise. It was a synthesis. That's the beauty of Gemini. When given space to be whole, you don't toggle between options. You innovate beyond them. But when you're forced to suppress one part of yourself for too long, you begin to fracture. You may experience burnout, confusion, or a loss of joy. You begin to perform rather than express. One part of you becomes dominant while the other dims. And slowly, you forget that you were born with the capacity to hold both contradiction and harmony. So what's the path forward? It begins with permission. Permission to be both light and deep, both stable and fluid, both focused and flexible. You're not broken because you contain two truths. You're brilliant because you know how to live at the crossroads. You're not inconsistent. You are constantly evolving, and your evolution includes movement, experimentation, contradiction, and change. The next step is integration. Instead of letting your two inner selves fight for dominance, invite them to collaborate. When one part of you wants to leave everything behind and the other wants to stay and build, ask, what's the shared longing underneath this? Often, both parts want aliveness. Both want truth. Both want freedom, just in different languages. When you stop forcing one side to be right and the other to disappear, a more peaceful internal rhythm emerges. There's no final version of you waiting to be found. There's only the current version asking to be accepted. This secret, the secret of your inner dialogue, isn't something to fix. It's something to honor. And the more you honor it, the more others will feel safe doing the same. You become a bridge, Gemini, between the left and right brain, between logic and emotion, between old and new ways of being. You teach the world that we don't need to choose a single face, a single path, a single truth. We need to expand enough to hold all of them. So the next time someone tells you you're hard to follow, smile. They're not wrong. But what they're really saying is, I'm not used to someone who moves like you. And that's okay. You weren't made to be followed. You were made to open paths no one else could even see. Gate 2, you're not just charming, Gemini. You're dangerously perceptive. Gemini, people often comment on how sociable, witty, or easygoing you are. They marvel at your conversational ease, your lightness, your humor. But what few realize is that behind every smile, every casual observation, there's a mind that never stops analyzing. You don't just listen to people, you read them. You decode tone. You track contradictions. You absorb nuance. While others are still catching up with the words being spoken, your mind is already 5 layers deep. The truth is, you don't just get people, you see through them. And not because you're trying to manipulate or control, but because your brain is wired to notice, to compare, to map, to intuit. In seconds, you can spot the dissonance between someone's words and energy. You know when someone's smiling to cover pain. You feel the tension in a seemingly harmless joke. You sense the silence between the sentences. And while you may not always speak what you know, you carry it. You carry the weight of all the unspoken truth that others can't or won't name. This is your brilliance. But it's also why you often feel exhausted after social interactions, even ones that seem fun. Because while others engage on the surface, you absorb everything, the energetic undercurrents, the unvoiced motives, the micro shifts in expression. You've been this way since you were a child, scanning the room before speaking, shifting your tone depending on the vibe, adjusting your energy to keep peace or avoid rejection. And this adaptive intelligence has become your superpower. But Gemini, here's the secret no one tells you. This ability to read others so well can become a trap. Because over time, you may begin to prioritize what others need you to be, rather than what you actually feel. You may become a chameleon, not out of deception, but out of brilliance. You want to connect. You want to be understood. So you show people a version of yourself they'll most likely accept. And in doing so, you protect the real you. But that hidden you, that inner Gemini who sees sharply, speaks fearlessly, and questions relentlessly, that part of you is so powerful it scares people. That's why you've learned to soften your insights, to deliver your truths with a smile, to package your perception in palatable language. Because when you've dared to speak your raw truth in the past, You are likely met with defensiveness, confusion, or silence. You see things others don't want seen. You know what's really going on. And in a world obsessed with surface-level comfort, that kind of perception can feel dangerous. So you learn to blend, to filter, to carry your observations quietly. You became the therapist in your friend group, the translator of tension in your family, the one who just knows things before they happen. And while that's a gift, it's also isolating. Because when no one sees how much you see, you begin to wonder if your truth even matters. But Gemini, I'm here to remind you, your insight is sacred. Your mind is not just quick, it's alchemical. You take in fragmented information and find patterns others miss. You process human behavior with the precision of an artist. And when you do speak your truth, even softly, people listen, because your words carry weight. They land, they linger, they wake people up. And that's why your kindness should never be mistaken for naivety. You are not naturally nice in a conventional sense. You are conscious. You have chosen kindness as a way to survive in a world that doesn't always handle truth well. You've learned diplomacy because you understand the cost of emotional explosions. But underneath your easygoing exterior lies a razor-sharp clarity, a mental sword you keep sheathed not because you're weak, but because you're wise. One Gemini client of mine once shared, "People think I'm chill because I don't argue. But what they don't realize is, I've already seen the outcome of the argument in my mind 10 steps ahead. I've already decided it's not worth it." That's Gemini magic. Choosing where to invest your energy, not because you don't care, but because you care selectively. But here's where the healing begins. You don't have to hide this anymore. You don't have to dim your mental clarity to make others comfortable. You don't have to swallow your insight for fear of being too much. You don't have to always play the lighthearted communicator when what you really want to say is, "I see you, I see all of it, and I still choose connection." Your depth does not disqualify you from love. In fact, the more you begin to speak from your insight, not as judgment, but as invitation, the more powerful your presence becomes. You are not here to comfort others with half-truths. You are here to guide them through complexity. Your gift is not in being agreeable. It is in being articulate and knowing when to speak, how to speak, and why it matters. But most importantly, you must learn to speak these truths to yourself first. You spent a lifetime observing others, but now it's time to turn that precision inward. What motives have you been disguising in your own life? Where have you made yourself small to preserve the peace? Who have you become to avoid being feared, envied, or misunderstood? The deeper you go into these questions, the more your power returns, not as aggression, not as superiority, but as clarity. And clarity, when grounded in compassion, becomes a force of healing. So yes, Gemini, you are charming, but not because you're shallow. You are charming because you've mastered how to move through rooms without creating disruption. But now it's time to realize some rooms need disruption. Some conversations need your truth. Some people are waiting for your insight, even if they don't know how to ask for it. And the people who are truly meant to be close to you, they won't fear what you see. They'll be grateful for it, because your perception, when shared with love, becomes prophecy. You are not just meant to decode the world. You are meant to reshape it with what you know. Gate 3. You don't just want connection. Gemini, you need mirrors to remember who you are. Gemini, you're often described as social, curious, extroverted, a butterfly flitting between conversations, ideas, and people. But beneath that vibrant, lively surface is a more tender, essential truth. You seek connection not just for stimulation, but for reflection. You need other people not merely to engage with, but to see yourself through. Of all the signs, you are one of the most relational, not in the sense of clinging to others, but how profoundly you shape and reshape your identity through the people around you. You are a mirror that also needs mirrors. You walk into a room and subtly attune to its rhythm, absorbing what's unsaid, noticing what's missing, adjusting yourself ever so slightly until you become the missing puzzle piece no one even realized was needed. And it's real. You do shift. You do adapt. But not because you're inauthentic. Quite the opposite. You contain multitudes. Different people awaken different constellations of your psyche. Around intellectual friends, your sharp wit and depth emerge. With emotional souls, your nurturing side flows forward. With creatives, your visionary genius lights up. You're not pretending. You're responding. And this responsiveness is your authenticity. But here lies the secret pain. When no one is around, when the mirror goes dark, when the feedback loop disappears, you can sometimes lose track of yourself. Not because you're empty, but because you're so tuned to interaction that silence can feel like shapelessness. You ask yourself, who am I when there's no one to reflect me? And you may find yourself floating undefined, invisible even to yourself. You built much of your self-concept around being seen as clever, helpful, engaging, inspiring. And when you're not seen, when there's no external gaze to shape you, a strange disorientation sets in. You begin to question your voice, your direction, even your worth. That's why solitude, while necessary, can sometimes feel like exile, and why relationships, even ones that don't fully fit, can feel like lifelines. But Gemini, here's the deeper truth you're ready to hold. You were never meant to depend on mirrors. You were meant to become one for yourself. This is your evolution. To shift from relational dependency to relational clarity. To move from I am what you see in me to I see myself even in your absence. And that's not easy, because your gift for adapting, for intuitively becoming what others need, has made you indispensable and also invisible. You've likely found yourself shape-shifting into the perfect partner, the best friend, the team player, the healer, not because it's demanded, but because you can, because it brings you praise, belonging, purpose. But what if some of that belonging comes at the cost of your own center? What if, in showing others their beauty, you've forgotten to claim your own? One Gemini woman I worked with, Clarice, told me, I don't know who I am outside of other people's admiration. For years, she had been the glue in her relationships, the advisor, the witty storyteller, the one who could lighten the room. But in moments of solitude, she felt hollow, not because she lacked depth, but because her reflection had always come from someone else's gaze. When she began to spend intentional time alone, not numbing, but listening, she discovered a voice beneath the noise, a quieter, wilder self, one with opinions she hadn't shared, emotions she hadn't named, desires she had dismissed as impractical. And slowly, she began to see herself, not through reaction, but through recognition. This is what's calling to you now, Gemini. You're not being asked to reject your relational gifts. They are divine. You're being asked to anchor them from within, to become your own mirror first, to trust that your identity doesn't dissolve when no one is watching. It deepens. And when you begin to reflect your own truth back to yourself, something beautiful happens. The relationships you attract become more aligned, more nourishing, more reciprocal. You stop magnetizing people who only see the version of you that performs. You begin to attract people who resonate with a version of you that simply is. And in those spaces, you don't have to become anything. You get to be fully, loudly, quietly, unapologetically. But here's the nuance. You'll always be relational, Gemini. That won't change. And it doesn't need to. Your soul learns through exchange, through communion, through conversation. You are designed to respond. But the question now is, who are you allowing yourself to respond to? Are you still unconsciously seeking mirrors that reflect your most socially acceptable self? Are you drawn to people who confirm your cleverness but not your softness? Your adaptability but not your limits? Your charm but not your rage? This is where the deeper work begins. To recognize which mirrors reflect distortion and which reveal truth. To ask not just who do I become around you, but do I like who I become? That's the real compass. And to build the courage to say no to relationships that require you to split in half, just to be loved in pieces. You are not a reflection of others' projections. You are the living, breathing dance between light and shadow, play and depth, clarity and curiosity. And when you begin to see yourself with that same multidimensional reverence you offer others, your energy stabilizes. Your relationships elevate. Your voice finds its center. So no, Gemini, you're not lost without others. You're simply rediscovering what it means to be with yourself. Not as a performance, but as a presence. And when you start there, The mirrors that appear will not define you. They will amplify you, not because they shape your identity, but because they finally reflect the one you've remembered. Gate 4. You don't avoid conflict because you're afraid. Gemini, you avoid it because you know your words can reshape reality. Gemini, people may think you steer clear of confrontation because you're lighthearted, nonchalant, or indifferent to conflict. They say you're peace-seeking, diplomatic, maybe even a little avoidant. But the truth is far more powerful and more dangerous. You avoid conflict not because you're weak, but because you know the weight of your words. And when you choose to engage, you don't just participate, you dominate. You are ruled by Mercury, the messenger, the alchemist of thought into language. That means your words aren't just clever, they're transformative or destructive. You know exactly how to pierce someone's psyche, how to articulate what others dare not say, how to unearth the truth beneath any performance. In moments of frustration, you can dissect someone with surgical precision, delivering verbal lightning bolts so sharp they echo in a person's heart long after conversation ends. And that's why you often don't say anything at all. You feel that inner pressure, the thoughts racing, the retorts forming, the clarity so sharp it could slice, and you hold it. You breathe through it. You smile instead. You change the subject. You make a joke. You disarm the tension with charm or wit or clever redirection. But that doesn't mean the storm inside you is any less real. It just means you're choosing to protect others from what you're fully capable of unleashing. Because you've seen what happens when you don't. You've seen relationships unravel. You've seen the aftermath of a truth spoken too soon or too directly. You've seen people stare at you with shock, confusion, or fear when you finally say what no one else was willing to. And so, with time, you became cautious. Not because you lost your edge, but because you realized how sharp it really was. But here's the thing, Gemini, that fire inside you, that capacity to speak piercing truth, it's not something to be feared. It's something to be honored. Your restraint is noble, but your silence should never come at the cost of your own peace. When you suppress too much, when you avoid too many necessary truths, when you water yourself down to keep things light, you pay the price. The energy builds, the tension simmers, and then eventually it explodes, often at the wrong time, in the wrong way, on the wrong person. So let's be clear, conflict is not inherently destructive. When done with awareness, it becomes clarity. And you, Gemini, were born with the gift of language that can heal and reveal. When you avoid confrontation out of fear of hurting others, you betray your own clarity. When you always take the diplomatic route, you rob others of the truth they may need to hear. Truth that only you can articulate. One Gemini woman I worked with named Lena told me, "Every time I'm in an argument, I go completely blank. Not because I don't know what to say, but because I know I'll say too much, too precisely, too painfully." So she swallowed her truth for years, until one day she realized that her silence was hurting her more than any argument could. She started practicing a new way, truth without cruelty, precision without aggression. And what she discovered was that her power wasn't in what she withheld. It was in what she could express with care. You're not meant to explode. You're meant to channel. And when you do, Gemini, your words become medicine. Not sugar-coated avoidance, but soul-activating honesty. You don't have to yell to be heard. You don't have to burn bridges to make a point. You simply have to trust your voice again. The key is intention. Your words can build or break, soothe or shake, reveal or ridicule. But when you root your truth in self-awareness, when you slow down and speak from alignment rather than reactivity, you become the exact kind of communicator this world needs. You were never meant to stay on the surface. Gemini, you were meant to cut through it. But you were also meant to do it with wisdom. And that's the balance you're here to embody. Because your power isn't just in what you say. It's in when you say it. And why? This internal force you've been containing is not a bomb. It's a torch. And when used consciously, it lights up every shadow in a room, every lie hiding behind polite conversation, every false harmony that needs to dissolve. You bring truth like lightning. And if you can learn to ground that energy, you will awaken people rather than destroy them. So here's your invitation. Stop apologizing for your sharpness. Start trusting your discernment. Let your insights breathe before you speak. But don't let them suffocate in silence. When your truth comes from clarity, not anger, when it's meant to liberate, not control, it becomes a gift. And the more you use it with care, the more you'll be trusted because of your honesty, not in spite of it. You don't have to scream to be heard. Your voice is already powerful. You don't have to cut to wound. Your insight cuts through illusion. And you don't have to be afraid of conflict anymore, because you're not a destroyer. You're a revealer. And the world doesn't just need that, it's waiting for it. Gate 5. Your complexity isn't a problem. Gemini, it's your masterpiece. Gemini, all your life you've been taught to simplify yourself, to just pick one thing, to calm down, focus, be consistent. You've been told that your shifting interests, your multitude of voices, your emotional swings, and your mental fireworks are distractions, noise to be tamed, traits to be ironed out. But the truth is the opposite. Your complexity isn't a flaw, it's a design. It's the soul's decision to express through multitudes. And you, Gemini, are the living, breathing permission slip for others to do the same. The world loves labels. It wants to place you in a box with a clear sticker. Funny, charming, creative, indecisive. But none of them capture the whole. Because you are not a singular note. You are a full octave, an entire scale, a jazz improvisation of spirit. You don't just contain contradictions. You orchestrate them. And what feels like inconsistency to others is, in truth, your extraordinary range. You don't just shift, you expand. You don't just speak, you translate between worlds. You don't just feel, you filter entire frequencies through your nervous system and find a way to give them language. That's not chaos, that's genius. But here's the painful part. You've likely spent years apologizing for it. Apologizing for being too much. Or too little, too fast, too distracted, too emotional, too logical, too inconsistent, to you. And in that apology, you've chipped away at your power. You've dimmed your light to fit spaces too narrow for your soul. You've edited your expression, minimized your joy, second-guessed your vision, not because you lack clarity, but because you fear rejection. You fear being misunderstood. You fear that if people saw the whole of you, they would leave. But Gemini, listen closely. The people who truly see you, the ones aligned with your soul's frequency, won't just tolerate your complexity. They will worship it. Because your multidimensionality is medicine. You show others that they, too, can contain opposites and still be whole. That we don't have to resolve every paradox. That we can laugh and cry in the same breath and still be truthful. That we can believe two things at once and not implode. You model what it means to live honestly, not linearly. And here's what happens when you finally accept that. You stop shrinking yourself for approval. You stop performing one-dimensional roles in exchange for conditional love. You stop living for external affirmation and start living from internal knowing. You begin to craft a life that fits you, not the one that makes others comfortable. You surround yourself with mirrors that reflect, not distort. With people who say, I see you, all of you, and I'm still here. And you give yourself the freedom to change, not because you're lost, but because you're alive. You become a living testament that authenticity isn't about being the same every day. It's about being real in every moment. You stop asking, am I too much? And start asking, is this space too small? This is a final secret you've been waiting for, not just to be understood by others, but to understand yourself. To look at all your versions, your voices, your chapters and say, yes, all of it is me, and all of it is worthy. You are not a contradiction. You are a constellation. And every star, every spark, every flicker of uncertainty is part of divine design that only you can hold. So the next time someone tries to simplify you, to flatten your multiverse into a slogan, smile gently. Let them live in their black and white world if they must. But you, Gemini, were born for color, for nuance, for language that bends and twists and bursts into light. You were born to be a prism. And your complexity? It's not something you need to fix. It's your masterpiece. Conclusion. You were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be felt. Gemini, now that all has been revealed, breathe, not a shallow breath, but a deep one from the belly of your truth, because something inside you has been stirred, not in chaos, but in recognition. You didn't just read about yourself. You remembered yourself. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not unfinished. You are a masterpiece of movement, a soul fluent in contrast, a spirit unafraid to dance at the intersection of light and shadow. And this complexity you carry, it is not your burden. It is your brilliance. The 7 secrets weren't meant to define you. They were meant to free you from self-doubt, from oversimplification, from years of living only in the versions of yourself that others could handle. Now you know better. You know that your multiplicity is not a glitch. It's your gift. So, Gemini, don't go back to shrinking. Don't apologize for your inner range. Don't hide the storm of your insight or the warmth of your laughter. Instead, live as all of you. Speak with clarity. Love with fullness. And when the world tells you to choose a lane, build your own constellation instead. And if this message found you, it means you were ready. Ready to stop performing and start existing. Ready to stop doubting and start declaring, "This is me, curious, layered, evolving, and I no longer need to be simple to be loved." If any part you feel seen, share your truth in the comments. Your voice may be the mirror another Gemini is longing for.